Final item is, and it wouldn't be a meeting of this committee if there wasn't something from the Productivity Commission to be dealing with, and
It's a good way to finish, Madam Chair.
yep, it is.
Consolidate our work.
Welcome to our Prodcom team who worked through the huge piece of information that came to us from the Productivity Commission, the size of a very large old-fashioned telephone book that's been reduced down to a very sensible submission. We've workshopped this, we've discussed it, so I think we've got a very brief presentation, and then we'll take some questions, and hopefully that will be it. Thank you.
Thank you. So the approach that we thought we'd take this morning was just to briefly cover the background to the inquiry, the overarching themes in our proposed submission, and the next steps to give you the context for the inquiry. So just in terms of the purpose and the scope of the inquiry, just a reminder, it's a blue skies inquiry, review of the urban planning system. The Productivity Commission have been given 2 clear instructions in terms of what's expected to be covered in their final report. They're expected to identify criteria for assessing current and future reform, and they're also expected to produce a number of alternative models for a future urban planning system. The instructing ministers have given quite clear guidance that they are expecting the Commission to consider the governance, funding and delivery mechanisms similar to those already enabled by the current suite of Resource Management Act, Land Transport Management Act and Local Government Act. They've also been very clear in terms of what is out of scope of the inquiry, so an assessment of the previous or current reforms around the urban planning system or legislation is quite clearly scoped out of this inquiry. So the wider context in terms of the inquiry, this inquiry comes on the back of the Using Land for Housing inquiry of last year. It also comes on the back of government's response a couple of weeks ago to that Using Land for Housing inquiry, and also the earlier 2011 Housing Affordability inquiry. So there's a relatively consistent theme through those inquiries. The wider context is there's also a number of fairly significant urban planning reforms underway, including the RMA reform and the work being done under the Better Local Services Bill. There's also the reform that it has been signalled by the government's response to the Using Land for Housing inquiry, the previous Commission inquiry.
So this slide just summarises some of the overarching themes that were developed after we had our Auckland Development Committee workshop on the 30th of August. So just those overarching themes listed there, the first being that Council values the wider contribution of planning to a range of goals for community outcomes. The Commission lists their rationale for planning, if you like, and they state sort of 3 points: regulating negative spillovers from land use, providing and funding local public goods, and providing and managing essential infrastructure services. So we're just, from a council's point of view, broadening that scope. The second point there being that we, in our draft submission, reiterating the principles that we made in our response to the issues paper, those 3 principles being planning as a system, planning for future funding challenges, and robust decision making and strong public engagement. The Commission identified as its principles for designing an urban planning framework flexibility and responsiveness, which was largely expressed as the ability to change land use easily, the provision of development capacity to meet demand, mobility of residents and goods to and through the city, and the ability to fit land use activities within a clearly defined biophysical envelope. The Next, those broad themes was the concerns that Jen's just mentioned here about the broader ongoing reform program within central government and how the recommendations within the Commission's draft report might be taken as a cohesive whole, and we think that there are some issues there around significant change. We also make the point in the draft submission that the unitary plan has enabled considerable and significant development capacity. We're also making the point in the draft submission that the focus now for Council, in light of the unitary plan progress, our focus now shifts to the significant challenges for funding and delivering infrastructure. And the final theme there in our draft submission is that there are impacts of recommendations the Productivity Commission makes that are unexamined for Māori.
Madam Chair, I'm prepared to move the
Are you
recommendation.
happy to move?
Yeah, I think it's a good synopsis of what was discussed at the workshop.
Oh,
And I don't think we need to go into it really in any depth. I think what's been put down there is well done.
okay. Shall we just cover next steps and then we'll get into that?
Thank you. So the submissions for this inquiry close on the 3rd of October. In terms of the final report due from the Productivity Commission, they'll be tabling that with Cabinet on the 30th of November, and then we'll be waiting for government decisions on what the resulting work program will look like.
Thank you. Jennifer and Toby, thank you. I think you've done a superb job on this, as Councillor Wood says. So Councillor Wood will move. I'm happy to second, and it will be in the hands of the next council how they treat this.
I
Yeah,
just want to
Councillor
speak and
Wood.
also thank the officers for the work that they have done. I think they were very detailed in their in what they gave us at the workshop, and I think that was very helpful, and they certainly have taken on board the responses and the comments, and I think that's well reflected in the document, so thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. I think we might actually add that as a third recommendation, because the ongoing work that's been done to react to the Productivity Commission submissions, I think, should be acknowledged, because it's often in a very short time frame with a huge degree of complexity, and I think we are well served by our team who has worked this through. So we'll add an acknowledgement for the work done on this. Any questions? Councillor Casey.
Two questions. Is there any fronting this? Are we fronting it verbally?
We haven't planned to do that at this stage, no.
I think we should. I think we should send our best gun, George. I think we should, yeah.
I think we should, but we will,
Yeah, Kathy.
we may,
It's the 3rd of October, George, you'll still be here.
No, it closes
no,
on the 3rd
it
of
closes on the
October.
I
3rd.
don't think it works like that.
Oh,
with
I
the
see. Can
productivity
you just explain then when we'd get the opportunity to speak to it? Because I think we should.
So the Productivity Commission are open to engagement, my understanding is, right up until the submissions close, but it may be that we can have some conversations with them around that as well.
Madam Chair, I'd say that this is a matter where the officers have got the in-depth knowledge and understanding.
Oh, no. This is a real political grab for power, George, and it should be fronted by the politicians, absolutely.
If we're dealing with the Productivity Commission at this stage, it's not the politicians that we're talking to.
It's a politician's, well, as a politician, through the
Hang on,
chair,
through-
I'm objecting to the power grab by the government through this.
Yeah. Councillor Casey, I agree with you, and I think the timing is unfortunate because it does straddle two councils, but I think if there is an opportunity to be heard by, if they are doing formal hearings, and we have had opportunities previously, I think, to be heard in relation to this, particularly the one that causes some of us the most concern, which is on page 16, that the trigger mechanism. I think we do need to be prepared to speak quite strongly about some of our concerns in here. So I don't think we can finalise it because we are between two councils, but I think we need to note that we would like to find an opportunity to speak directly to this if possible.
Could we do a D to that effect? That we
could.
recommend the new council makes a
Yeah.
submission, a verbal submission. whatever the words are.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yep, we can do
I can
that.
follow that up with the commission for you.
Yeah, good idea. So we'll make that a D. So I'll put that recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. And just before I close, I would like to, and this is a perfect chance to do it while we've been acknowledging our staff on this issue, I want to acknowledge the staff who have worked with this committee over the last 6 years in particular, and in the last 3 years as we've done a lot of extraordinarily hard work. I think we have been amazingly well served. I'm amazed constantly by the clarity of thought and the quality of information we receive. It's not always agreed with and it's not always accepted, but we can't fault the quality of information that comes our way. What we do with it is then up to us as politicians. But I'd like to thank Dean and Jim, and I particularly want to warmly thank the extraordinary Tam and Catherine for their attention to detail and their constant support and ensuring that everything runs smoothly. I think they are fantastic, and I'd like us to give them a round of applause. Thank you. And finally, acknowledging our IMSB partners around the table for this committee. Thank you for the partnership. Thank you for the huge amount of work. Thank you for holding the quorum on many occasions, and thank you for participating in workshops, in smaller groups that get the work done, and for always being here, and for that we acknowledge you. Now, apparently there is going to be lunch for the committee downstairs from 12:30. Can we make it
Cancel it.
12? I think we should all just cancel it. Is it too late to cancel it?
Unless we have it
Sadly, we
upstairs.
can't,
Have it up on the 26th.
we can't.
Can we have it on the 26th floor in the
26
kitchen?
done, sorted. Okay. Councillor Filipaina.
Chair, I know that we've mentioned the unitary plan quite a few times today. I've spoken to John Duguid, and I'm unsure if the committee wants an update on the appeals as a result of it closing tomorrow. So he is here, and I'm sort of putting that to you, Chair, if the committee would want an update on the appeals, as in the numbers and everything else. So that's just one thing. But if it's okay, Chair, just
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. People will want to know. Mr.
before he
Duguid.
sits down, Chair, I just want to publicly thank you as well, as the Deputy Chair of the Unitary Plan Committee. And what's not known to the committee around the information is 70 to 80% of the independent hearings recommendations were actually accepted by them on behalf of the staff. You'll thank the staff, but I just want to thank you as well in regards to the leadership with the unitary plan over nearly 6 years. So thanks, John, and thank you, Chair. Ngā mihi ki a koe.
Thank you. John.
Thank you, Councillor Filipaina. As of this morning, a dozen appeals, either confined to a specific site or a specific topic, and not in any way holding up the bulk of the unitary plan. So that's all pretty positive. Obviously, people have got until the end of tomorrow to lodge appeals, so we may receive some broader appeals, but at this stage they are fairly very confined issues, and that was one of the concerns with appeals, is they may hold up the plan for another 6 months, a year or longer. But these appeals are ones that we can work through and maybe resolve without a hearing, or perhaps they may need a hearing. But the good news is small numbers so far and very confined in terms of the topics they address.
Yep, it is.
Excellent.
It is.
Well, that's
Excellent.
fantastic.
Yep. Have a
Thank
list.
you. That's marvellous. What a positive note to
Yeah.
end on.
Brilliant.
So we'll kind of breathe out and breathe a bit of a sigh of relief and declare the meeting closed. Thank you all.